In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthropomantic Fiend and I do horror-related things on the internet. I hope that everybody is doing well currently in quarantine during the pandemic. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Devil's Nightmare. This came out in 1971. It was originally released in Belgium under a title that translates to The Devil's Longest Night, and it was originally released under a title that translates to The Terrifying Night of the Demon in Italy. It's also known as The Devil Walks at Midnight, and it was released in the US in 1974. With a lot of these movies that were made in Europe in a language that was not English and then dubbed, there are a lot of alternate titles and it gets really confusing, but I love that stuff, even though it's frustrating to research. But in case you have trouble finding this movie, which you shouldn't, it's free to watch on the internet, there's that stuff. This movie is about this castle where this old baron lives who's got something of a dark, troubled past that we get in a prologue. A bunch of people come to visit him and stay in the castle for several nights. Why? I don't know. They never tell us. This group of people, each one of them represents or seems to represent one of the 7 deadly sins, although it's hard to tell which represents which. Because of Baron's said troubled past, a succubus comes to visit the castle and starts tempting and attempting to kill all of the people in the castle. Said tortured past is given to us in a prologue set in Berlin during World War II, featuring the Baron, who appears to be a military officer. It's in Germany, but it's unclear which side he's supposed to be for, made more unclear by the American accent dubbed over his original speaking voice. All I know is he's a guy in uniform fighting in Germany during World War II, and he's, regardless, not a good person because his wife dies in childbirth, and it seems that he's hoping for a son, but instead he ends up getting a daughter. He ends up stabbing said daughter to death whilst still a baby. That's really the majority of the action we actually get with the Baron, but I hate him already. Then we flash forward to the present day of the movie, which I presume is the 1970s, with all of these people going to this castle, and a succubus story where we have a bunch of different people who are tempted by the succubus. She starts picking them off one by one, as you could expect. The prologue is shown to us in black and white, and then it translates to color. I tried to compare this to Wizard of Oz, but it's not really the same, although the color does make the visuals in the later part a bit more fantastical and dreamlike. The black and white gives it a sense of a certain time period, which I think works. It's just a thing that a lot of movies do anyway. The castle setting in the movie is absolutely gorgeous. The surrounding mountains and forest and everything, which we don't see as much of, but we do see a little bit of, are absolutely beautiful looking. It's this old castle in the middle of the European country, and it's very beautiful. The interior that we see of the castle is very, very Gothic and beautiful as well. And the whole movie just has this really beautiful Gothic look. There's even a mad scientist, or alchemists, as we find out, lab in the lower regions of the castle, and the whole movie just looks amazing. The costumes are decent. They're not period in sort of a Victorian Gothic way, because that's not when the movie's set, but they have sort of this sense of classiness about them. The succubus, on the other hand, doesn't get as much of a classy costume. It's a very sleazy costume, actually, but it's very succubus-y. It's like the costume that you see Vampirella wearing in the Vampirella comics, but all black and probably of not as quite a nice a material, but she's wearing that and various other skimpy costumes through pretty much the whole movie. It characterizes her as the succubus and very seductive quite well. The whole movie just looks really good, from cinematography to the set design and the location and costuming wise. So I hope there is some kind of restored version of this movie out there, because the colors in this version are a little bit muted, but it's just a beautiful looking movie, so I hope there is a nicer restored version out there. Effects wise, there is the stabbing of the baby at the beginning of the movie, but it's not convincing at all. We see it go into the baby, but it's like going through the cradle while the baby's all blanketed, and the baby doesn't even seem to react to the fact that it's being stabbed. It's clear that they've got the baby's head somewhere in a fake body there, and it's just not convincing, but I'm glad it's not, because I don't want to see a baby stabbed to death realistically. Not a good effect, but I'm kind of glad. There are some other sort of visual effects where things fade in and out, but the only other really effect in the movie is when the succubus transforms from her normal human pretty face to her true evil succubus look. It didn't feel all that scary. It just looked like kind of nice gothy makeup to me. She does look a little bit older, but it just kind of makes her look like Maleficent to me, which I did not mind. And she's got black lipstick and her white nails have turned black. It wasn't scary, but nothing in this movie is scary to me. It's just very aesthetically pleasing. So that was a pro in my eyes. Oh, I forgot to mention, a cat dies in this movie. There's no preface to this. There's just a dead cat in this movie. FYI, it doesn't really add anything to the movie. It just made me sad. We don't even see the cat before it's dead. It's just there. Just be warned, dead cat. The other thing that I really, really liked about this movie was the music, possibly more than anything else. There's this use of harpsichord and pipe organ and this haunting female voice that is just super, super gothic. There's this theme that we get almost a rock-ish version of at the beginning of the movie, with sort of drums and bass guitar behind it, but it repeats throughout the movie, and it's super infectious. It sort of weaves its way into the movie repetitively, the way something like the Suspiria theme would, or another sort of Argento movie theme would, the way a Goblin score carries one of those things. I don't know if this is as good as a Goblin score, but thus far, out of all the movies I've reviewed in this box set, even above things that I praised, like the soundtrack for Kill Baby Kill, this is the best soundtrack I've heard, and that theme is amazing. I want to cover it. It's just super haunting, and it worms its way into your brain, and I just adore everything about the soundtrack in this movie. Sound-wise, this movie is dubbed, and while it's better than some really bad dubbing that I've seen, it's still bad dubbing, but I kind of expected that, so I kind of forgot about it at a point and didn't care. Characters-wise, their dialogue feels forced and not real and pretty cheesy. Maybe the original dialogue was good, but whatever they dubbed in was pretty silly. But again, I'm kind of used to that, so I didn't really care. All of the guests that arrive are supposed to represent 7 deadly sins. It was kind of fun to guess which might be which, but I never quite figured it out for all of them. There's this guy who literally never stops eating. He's probably a grown-up version of Augustus Gloop from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He's clearly meant to be gluttony. And there's another woman who's found the alchemist's lab in the basement and is totally obsessed with the idea that the Baron has found a way to turn lead into gold and wants to get all of that. She's clearly meant to be greed. There's a lesbian couple, it seems, although one of them also decides to make out with one of the guys at one point that are, I think they're supposed to be lust, but I don't know what he's supposed to represent, and it's all very confusing. Lust kind of runs through the whole movie, being about a succubus, so I don't know. And then there's an old man who's just literally bothered by every single little thing and is angry about everything, Maybe he's supposed to be Wrath or something else of that nature, and I don't know. And there's a priest who I thought might be Pride, but by the end, There's also, of course, the succubus who we see. She, again, plays this very sort of dramatic, spooky, seductive character. She's very over the top and dramatic, but I absolutely love that stuff. It really works here. She probably gives my favorite performance in the film, although the old man who's angry about literally everything is funny enough that he is probably a close second for me. And there's also a creepy guide who leads them to the castle and also appears later. He's this very thin, gaunt, sinister guy, and I swear I've seen him in something else. If you know, let me know, but he was cool, and he does play an important role in the story eventually. There is a somewhat erotic scene between, again, the two women who clearly are having sex together, but there is no sex scene. But the version of the movie I have freezes up during the scene where they are getting rather friendly with each other and jumps to the next scene. I actually found a copy on the internet just to see if there was more of that scene. There's not much, but there is more, so I got this box set of movies used, so I kind of wonder why it skips at that particular moment. I kind of get the sense that whoever bought this kept replaying that scene for whatever reason, but then he realized that the internet existed, so he got rid of the box set. I'm sticking with that story, as ridiculous as it is. My one big dislike with this movie, or two of them, one of them's barely even related to the movie, but that is that there is a thumbnail for the movie on the selection screen on this disc that has this black-haired vampire with blood running down her chin and these huge fangs, and that's the image that they chose for this movie. Not once does that appear in the film, so I feel like I was cheated out of an awesome vampire, and that makes me angry. But that's not the movie's fault, that's whoever put this disc together. And my other big frustration is the biggest plot hole, which is, why are these people at the castle, manor, whatever? They never tell us. These people are just kind of there. It's literally never explained. But I really didn't care. I just thought this movie was gorgeous and really aesthetically pleasing. I loved the Gothic visuals. I loved all the kills, which I'll get into, and I loved the music, especially. The music in this movie is amazing. So again, kind of like I said with Kill Baby Kill, this movie is more style over substance, kind of in the tradition of Argento and Bava, but it does have a little bit more to its plot, even if there are things that go unexplained. What we do get provides for some really entertaining kills and some entertaining character interaction. If you are a fan of Gothic horror and of European stylized 70s horror in the vein of Argento, I think you will really enjoy this movie. It's not as bloody as some of that, but it is very beautiful and very stylized. I absolutely loved it. Again, highly recommend it to everyone. That is the spoiler-free section of my review for The Devil's Nightmare. Here are the spoilers. At the beginning of the movie, or rather at the opening of the not prologue part, there's this woman who's going around the castle taking photos, even though the Baron's telling her not to, and there's this POV shot of someone coming after her and then killing her. At least we think she dies. They never really explain it to us. There's just a shaky POV shot that goes after her, and then it just cuts away. I think it might be the same actress who plays the succubus later on, but I'm not sure, as we later find out that she is a daughter of the Baron's family, and the whole backstory behind the succubus is that one of the members of this family made a deal with the devil for, you know, all the things you would want, life, wealth, power, etc., etc. But in order for that to work, he is required to sacrifice all of the firstborn daughters of the family or something like that. So that's what he's doing at the beginning of the movie, but all of them come back as succubi to prey upon the family, and that is what this woman does. I can't tell if it's the photographer lady from the beginning of the movie, but if it's not, that scene is completely pointless, and I don't know why it's there. We are introduced to the succubus, and she starts to get acquainted with everyone. First kill we get is the guy who I believe represents gluttony. He literally never stops eating. So the succubus lays out this huge banquet for him and tells him to keep eating. And there's just intercut with some other plot stuff, these long drawn out shots of him eating and close-ups on his mouth as he's just shoving meat into it. And it's honestly really uncomfortable, but also hilarious because of how uncomfortable it is. And then eventually she asked him if he would like more wine and pours him a glass, and he drinks it and immediately starts choking on it and barfing up this green stuff, just this green liquid, and he falls on the floor dead. It's a very drawn out kill. It's very uncomfortable, but also really funny. That includes the barfing up green liquid part. The second kill is when the girl who represents greed and is after this alchemist gold in the basement goes down there. The succubus meets with her and is like, oh, I'm looking for the treasure too. So they go down there, and there's this huge vat of gold dust. The woman's just like, gold, and starts putting her hands in it, and I think the succubus even might shove her in just a little bit, but she starts, you know, drowning in it like it's quicksand and starts screaming, help me, and the woman just sort of looks at her as she falls in. She literally drowns in gold, as is fitting, so I thought that was a good kill. One of these women goes to have sex with this other guy. I literally don't know what they're supposed to represent. I'm not as familiar with all the 7 deadly sins, so if you know, let me know. They are having sex in their bedroom, but the old man is underneath them trying to sleep and is being kept awake by their sex noises. And it's the funniest thing, just hearing this moaning above him and watching him try to get sleep. It's hysterical, but he ends up eventually screaming at them through the ceiling to quiet down or finish up faster. So they decide to go somewhere else, which winds up being this torture chamber. The guy ends up getting stuck in the guillotine and getting decapitated, and the girl winds up getting shoved into the Iron Maiden, and they both get killed rather brutally. I don't know what significance that has for them, and I don't know what they were supposed to represent from the beginning, but it was very dark and decent enough, I suppose. Then the guy gets up and is just angry for some reason still, and he's just like, I know what you guys are up to, and starts running after someone who he suspects to be this woman, and it turns out to be the succubus, and she turns around and pushes him out a window, and he just falls on some spikes, I guess. It's kind of anticlimactic, and yeah, he just gets pushed out the window and falls on some spikes, and yeah. The other woman of this pair, I think she's supposed to be Lust, but maybe the other woman was too. Again, kind of hard to say, but the succubus turns this vine that is on the ground into a snake, and it goes into her room and bites her while she's doing other stuff. We never actually see it happen, but it was a decent enough concept. But again, the kills kind of drop off in their interestingness by the end of the movie, but I didn't really care. I was still entertained. The creepy guide who we saw at the beginning of the movie comes in at the end because the priest guy, who I was actually hoping would get killed in some way that takes away his pride, because he's got this whole chastity fidelity thing going on, but the succubus has been tempting him, so I kind of thought he would get killed off, but he turns out to be our hero, which I didn't really like, because I saw him as pride, and he's just very noble and seems to think he's better than everybody else, but he ends up being the hero of the movie, and the succubus can't do anything with him, so the creepy guide guy comes back and turns out to be the devil. and makes a deal with this guy to spare the other people but take his soul. The priest ends up making a deal with the devil. Everybody is restored at the very end of the movie, but whilst out fencing, the Baron gets accidentally gouged and stabbed to death the same way the baby was stabbed, and we get some exposition about how one of the servants in the castle was actually related to the Baron, and she was the succubus all along. She plays innocent, and she's just like, could I really be the succubus without knowing it? And the priest decides to stay with her and be nice to her, while in the meantime, everybody else is leaving on a bus. The devil is out there with a horse and carriage and manages to make the thing go off the cliff and burn up. The Baron is dead, and we just see the succubus, who's currently embracing the priest, look over at the devil and just smile. So basically everybody's screwed by the end of this movie. And that's the whole film. Plot's not the most complicated or the best, but it was very entertaining and very aesthetically pleasing. So again, if you like Gothic horror and 70s European stylized horror a la Argento or Bava, I highly recommend checking this movie out. That is the review. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye!